it was, I mean, women didn't just go out with strange men on concert tours in India in the 1950s and 60s and 70s. It just was unheard of. And so even though they could play, they couldn't go out on tour. They couldn't do things. But now it's a modern world and it's accepted and it's all right. And there are few very fine young tabla players who are women. Few very fine mridangam players who are women, and ghatam players and so on. And of course, there are many Western drummers who are women who are great, right? And so it's that expansion is happening. It's going on socially. We have dropped a few fences and crossed over some boundaries, and that has allowed, thankfully, for this stuff to happen, and I'm glad that this is going on. And there are a lot of women who are traveling instrumentalists, vocalists, and dancers, and so on from India who are, working with other men, and it's okay with their husbands, or it's okay with their wives. I mean, all that's normal. So yeah, so there are many, and hopefully there will be really a lot of them coming up soon. And so then we men tabla players will be at a disadvantage. That's what's going to happen. I mean, we can be preparing ourselves for this. That's okay. All right. But tabla musicians I admire, quite a few. I mean, there are so many musicians. I mean, every time you play with a musician, my understanding is that you see your music, yourself, through their eyes. And therefore you notice nooks and crannies and little corners and stuff that you've been ignoring. Because it's right there, you don't see right under your nose. It's like when you are in your house, you're fine and everything is good. If you're outside and you look into the window and say, hey, that doesn't look nice, you notice it. How Armstrong saw the Earth from the moon and suddenly realized how beautiful a planet we had. It's like that. So when I'm playing with musicians, I know that I learn a few tidbits about myself. They listen to my music through their ears, and then I hear their responses. And that allows me to respond differently to each one. So each musician playing with them is a different learning experience. I just did 2 tours back to back. So the whole of October mostly was a tour with Bela Fleck, the banjo player, Edgar Meyer, the bassist, and an Indian flautist named Rakesh Chaurasia. So we played as a quartet. We played about 15 concerts. And then the very next day I flew to Europe and started a tour with Dave Holland, the bass player, and Chris Potter, the horn player. We did a tour, and I finished that just a day before I got here. So, but playing with 2 different bass players, Edgar Meyer and Dave Holland, it was like day and night. It's like so different, and I found myself responding differently to each one of them. And it was simply because they drew stuff from me that was in there, but I wasn't paying any attention to, which made sense with what they were doing, and it worked. So in that sense, I admire that kind of interaction with musicians. The learning process is always a great one, and the learning can be from anyone and anybody. I learned one technique on the tabla from somebody who was a non-tabla player, wasn't a tabla player. But you know how some people just fool around on instrument? They don't know, and then through that process, they do something which, like, wow, that makes sense. And that's exactly what happened. So I've actually included that in my scheme of things, and I use that technique, and it works for me. And it came from somebody who wasn't even a tabla player, who wasn't even a musician. He just was fooling around, so that happens. I have mentors, like John McLaughlin is a mentor, who I have had the great fortune to have been with for years and learned from him. And Ali Akbar Khan is another one, Ravi Shankar is another, my father, of course. You know, I admire musicians who have the courage to take the leap of faith. It's a very special place to be. You know, you're not threatened in any way. When you get on stage, the last thing you want to be is threatened. You don't want to be threatened. You want to feel comfortable, relaxed, confident, and knowing that, oh, yeah, I can handle it, or if I can't, that's okay. It's not a problem. You know, tomorrow is another day. I'll just revisit then. So don't be threatened. It's very important. Okay. Any other questions? What?